This is where her lies end.
Ever watch someone you love rehearse fake emotions in front of a mirror at 3 in the morning? That's what I witnessed on my security feed when everything started falling apart. I'm Marcus Sullivan, 41 years old, and I've been operating Sullivan Logistics here in Nashville for the past decade. Started with my late father's single delivery van after he died from a massive stroke at 56, collapsed right in the driver's seat. Now I'm managing 23 trucks and pulling in roughly $3.2 million in annual revenue. Not too shabby for someone who began with one beat-up vehicle and a mountain of debt. But let me rewind to that mirror moment, because that's when I understood Rachel wasn't experiencing some emotional breakdown. She was practicing, standing there in her nightgown, contorting her face into expressions of sadness and fear, then evaluating her performance, then repeating it with different angles and emotions, like an actress preparing for opening night. I'd installed a comprehensive Honeywell security system about 7 months prior. 10 high-definition cameras with infrared capability, 5 terabyte network storage unit, automatic cloud backup every 12 hours with military-grade encryption. Our insurance provider reduced our premium by 18% for having professional surveillance, saving us roughly $4,000 yearly on a company with assets exceeding $2.5 million. The entire installation ran me about $4,500. When you're coordinating freight operations spanning 4 states, that return on investment justifies itself within 12 months. Those cameras were never intended to capture my wife rehearsing deceptive behavior. They existed for protection after we experienced a warehouse burglary where thieves attempted to strip wiring from our climate-controlled storage units. But modern surveillance technology records everything in shared spaces, including the corridor outside our master bedroom, where she assumed nobody would observe her activities. Rachel and I had been married 9 years. Met her while she worked as a legal assistant at Morrison & Associates downtown, completely unrelated to my business despite similar names. She was intelligent and driven, harboring ambitious aspirations about attending law school eventually, and establishing her own legal practice. I fully encouraged those goals, financing her law school entrance exam preparation courses twice, and helping her submit applications to 4 different institutions, including Vanderbilt and Belmont University College of Law. Nothing materialized. Her test scores were adequate but unremarkable, and legal education is prohibitively expensive. After that second rejection, she completely stopped working, claiming she was exploring alternative career paths while determining her future direction. Those alternative paths apparently involve spending entire days browsing commercial property listings and conducting extended phone conversations with attorneys about asset protection tactics and business appraisal methodologies. When I questioned her activities, she explained she was researching investment possibilities for our future. Maybe we should expand into commercial real estate, she suggested. It seemed reasonable then. Transportation companies require warehouse facilities, and Nashville has numerous undervalued industrial properties near the river districts. The logistics business had been exceptionally profitable for us. Began with local furniture deliveries for 5 stores in East Nashville. Now, we handle less than truckload freight for FedEx Ground, 3 major appliance wholesalers, and we'd recently secured a contract with a pharmaceutical distributor shipping throughout the South. Previous year, we netted approximately $470,000 in profit after covering expenses, taxes, and equipment financing, excluding the appreciation on our truck fleet and the warehouse property we purchased in 2018. Most people don't comprehend the complexity of logistics operations. It's not simply transporting goods between locations. You're managing Department of Transportation compliance, commercial driver licensing standards, fuel cost hedging when diesel prices fluctuate 25% within months, insurance expenses consuming 12% of revenue, and driver retention rates averaging 35% industry-wide. We'd been fortunate maintaining ours around 18% by compensating above market rates and providing comprehensive health coverage. The competition is merciless. You've got massive carriers like Schneider and Werner that undercut pricing through volume, local operators working at cost merely to keep vehicles moving, and tech startups attempting to disrupt traditional freight brokerage. Additionally, you're perpetually one collision away from litigation that could destroy everything if your coverage has gaps. Success transforms relationships between people. Rachel began asking different questions roughly 8 months ago. Why wasn't her name listed on business accounts? Why didn't she have input on major equipment acquisitions? I explained it was simpler for tax optimization, maintaining clean corporate structure. Dad had established the limited liability company that way back in 2004, and our accountant, Jennifer Martinez, advised against modifications unless absolutely necessary. Tennessee provides favorable regulations for single-member LLCs, and adding spouses can create complications if situations change. That explanation no longer satisfied her. She demanded understanding our complete financial landscape, not just household budgeting, but business cash flow, asset valuations, depreciation calculations, everything. Reasonable enough. Married couples should discuss finances openly. But when your spouse starts inquiring about business valuation formulas and whether equipment loans carry personal guarantees, that's not innocent curiosity. That's someone receiving professional consultation. The unusual behavior intensified over approximately 4 months. Phone constantly face down during meals, extended conversations that terminated abruptly when I entered rooms. She'd position herself strangely during disagreements, like performing for an invisible audience, always carrying that oversized designer handbag too, never more than arm's reach away. The same bag we'd argued about when she purchased it for $1,800 without mentioning it beforehand. I'm pragmatic by nature. When numbers don't balance in business, you audit everything. When machinery starts making concerning sounds, you disassemble it and locate the problem. When your wife begins acting like she's auditioning for some production you've never heard about, you investigate what's happening. So I started monitoring the security system access logs. The Honeywell software tracks every log and every file accessed, every recording downloaded. That's when I discovered Rachel had been accessing recordings extensively. The system displayed her username credentials, logged in at various hours, 3 in the morning while I slept, 4 in the afternoon, when I was at the facility addressing equipment malfunctions. She'd been methodically reviewing weeks of footage, downloading particular segments, creating her own copies of our arguments, and storing them on her personal laptop. I opened one of her saved files and immediately recognized we had serious trouble. It was from a dispute we'd had about finances. She'd bought that $1,800 handbag without discussion. In the original 30-minute recording, you could hear complete context. I'd arrived home from managing a driver who'd been involved in a minor accident on Interstate 65, noticed the receipt on the counter, asked if we could discuss significant purchases beforehand. We were reinvesting most profits into new equipment, eyeing 3 Freightliner Cascadias that would enable us to bid on longer routes, and cash flow was consistently tight in transportation business. The conversation started calmly. I explained my concerns about the Amazon freight contract we were pursuing. They were bidding out $600,000 over 18 months, but demanded evidence of financial stability. They wanted documented cash reserves and favorable debt-to-equity ratios. An unexpected $1,800 purchase wouldn't devastate us, but it represented the principle of coordination. She became defensive, accused me of treating her like a child requiring permission for purchases. I attempted explaining that wasn't my intention. We simply needed to coordinate spending so we didn't overdraw accounts when payroll was approaching. Things escalated from there, as they do when both people are exhausted and stressed. But the file she'd preserved only captured the final portion. My voice raised in frustration, stating she was being reckless with our finances. Her crying, questioning why I was being cruel to her. None of the context that preceded that moment. She was editing our conflicts. I spent the following 4 hours examining every file she'd accessed. Identical pattern throughout. Arguments lasting 25 or 35 minutes compressed into 90-second clips, making me appear like some tyrannical control freak screaming at his wife without provocation. The security system I'd installed to protect our business was being turned against me. The most disturbing part was recognizing how calculated everything was. I found footage of her reviewing previous recordings on her laptop, taking notes on which phrases provoked the strongest reactions from me. There was even video of her on the phone with someone, presumably an attorney, discussing which clips would be most compelling in court proceedings. But the definitive evidence was a conversation I'd completely forgotten about 4 months earlier, when she believed I was at the warehouse managing a refrigeration system failure. She'd invited her friend Monica over. They discussed her divorce strategy in explicit detail, sitting in our living room. The trick is provoking him to anger on camera, she told Monica, getting him to say things that sound menacing. Judges respond strongly to that material, especially when it's a successful businessman versus a frightened wife. Monica asked if she felt guilty about deception. "It's not deception if he genuinely is controlling," Rachel responded. "I'm just helping the truth emerge in a comprehensible way." He makes all financial decisions. He purchased this house without consulting me. He operates that business like I'm invisible. The conversation continued for 50 minutes. She outlined her entire strategy from initial recordings to final courtroom testimony. Even discussed her expected settlement amount. Half of everything plus ongoing support payments. That would essentially equal my entire salary. And what she'd do with the money afterwards. Maybe relocate to Atlanta, she said. Start fresh somewhere nobody knew about the divorce. I had everything recorded. Her conspiracy, her manipulation, her deliberate fraud. The only question was how to present it without appearing like I'd been spying on my wife. That's when I contacted Daniel Richardson. Daniel's been in logistics for 35 years, built Richardson Transport from 3 trucks to a $60 million operation before selling to J.B. Hunt in 2019. He's also survived 2 divorces, both contentious, both costly. If anyone would understand my situation, it was Daniel. We met at his preferred steakhouse downtown the following day. I presented the entire situation. The recordings, the editing, the conversation with Monica. Daniel listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head. "Marcus," he said when I finished, "you're in serious trouble, but you might also have the strongest evidence I've witnessed in a case like this." He pushed his plate aside and leaned in. "Question is, are you prepared to fight? Because once you commit to this path, there's no retreat. She's going to attack you with everything available." Daniel had fought his second wife, Catherine, for 4 years over business assets. She'd claimed emotional trauma, said the stress of being married to a workaholic transportation executive had caused her anxiety and depression, cost him $2.3 million in settlement, plus another $600,000 in legal expenses. "Difference is," Daniel said, "you've got proof she's fabricating. I just had my testimony against hers." He provided the name of his attorney, Robert Chen, who'd handled both his divorces and understood every tactical maneuver. Robert's expensive, but he's worth every dollar. "Tell him I referred you. I also consulted Tyler Morgan, my operations director, who'd been with the company for 5 years. Tyler had advanced from driver to dispatcher to operations, understood the business thoroughly. More importantly, he'd observed how Rachel behaved around the office during the occasional time she'd visited. "Boss, I don't want to overstep," Tyler said when I asked his opinion, "but your wife never seemed pleased about the business succeeding. Most spouses would be proud, but she always acted like the company was competing for your attention." Tyler had noticed other things too, how she'd ask detailed questions about our contracts and revenue when she thought I wasn't listening, how she'd question our drivers for information about routes and clients. At the time, we'd all assumed she was simply trying to understand the business better. "She asked me once about insurance policies," Tyler said. "Wanted to know if you were covered for disability, what would happen to the business if something happened to you. Said she was concerned about your health with all the stress you were managing." That conversation occurred 3 weeks before I'd installed the security system. Now it made complete sense. She wasn't concerned about my health. She was conducting research. I called Robert Chen that afternoon. He agreed to meet me the next day, warned me his retainer was $18,000 upfront. Fair enough. If Daniel trusted him with a $60 million business, I could trust him with mine. But first, I had preparation to complete. I spent the entire night backing up every file from the security system to 3 different locations: the cloud storage, a local encrypted drive I kept in our office safe, and another drive I took to Daniel's house for secure storage. If Rachel wanted to manipulate recordings, I'd ensure I possessed all the footage, not just the edited highlights she thought would serve her purposes. 4 weeks later, she made her move. I arrived home to find divorce documents on the kitchen counter beside a note stating she was staying at her mother's house until I relocated. The petition was 15 pages long, detailed accusations of emotional misuse, financial manipulation, and creating a hostile living environment. She was requesting half the business, the house, both vehicles, and monthly support payments that would basically equal my entire salary plus attorney fees. The language was brutal. According to the filing, I was a manipulative businessman who used his success to intimidate and isolate his wife. I controlled every aspect of our finances, prevented her from pursuing her professional goals, and created an atmosphere of fear through verbal threats and intimidation tactics. Robert Chen reviewed the filing while I waited in his office, occasionally making skeptical sounds. "She's claiming video evidence," he said finally. "Says you threatened her on multiple occasions, that you installed surveillance equipment to monitor her activities." My stomach sank. I knew precisely which recordings she possessed. "Can she do that?" I asked. "If she can substantiate these claims, maybe." Tennessee isn't a no-fault state regarding asset division. Misuse allegations change everything. He flipped through the pages. But Marcus, I've encountered cases like this before. The key will be context. Within 10 days, our joint accounts were frozen. Rachel's attorney, Patricia Dawson, had filed an emergency motion claiming I might conceal assets or retaliate financially against my wife. The judge granted it. Pending a full hearing, I had to borrow money from the business account to pay my own lawyer and cover basic expenses. That's when the business impact really started manifesting. Word circulates rapidly in the logistics industry, especially in a city like Nashville where everybody knows everybody. Our dispatcher started fielding calls from drivers questioning if their paychecks were secure. Two of our largest customers, the pharmaceutical distributor and one of the appliance wholesalers, started inquiring about our financial stability. The Amazon contract we'd been negotiating for 8 months suddenly went silent. Their procurement manager, who'd been enthusiastic about our proposal, stopped returning communications. Tyler pulled me aside one morning and said he'd heard through industry contacts that they were concerned about working with a company whose owner was experiencing a contentious divorce. "Boss, the guys are worried," Tyler said. "They're hearing stories about frozen accounts and legal battles, and some of them are already receiving calls from Nashville Freight Systems offering them positions." Nashville Freight Systems was our biggest local competitor, operated by a guy named Frank Morrison, who'd been attempting to steal our contracts for 4 years. He had a reputation for playing dirty, underbidding us just enough to capture accounts, then increasing prices once he had the business secured. Daniel Richardson called me that same week. "Marcus, you need to understand something. In this business, perception is everything. Your customers need confidence their freight will move on schedule every time. If they start thinking you're distracted by personal problems, they'll find alternatives." He was right, and it made me angrier than I'd been since this situation started. I'd worked 18-hour days for 10 years building this company. I'd missed family gatherings, skipped vacations, declined social invitations to ensure every delivery was on time and every customer was satisfied. Now Rachel was attempting to destroy all of that with lies and edited video clips. Her strategy became evident over the following 6 weeks. Patricia Dawson was known as one of Nashville's most aggressive divorce attorneys. She specialized in high-asset divorces where emotional misuse was alleged, and her track record was impressive. She'd gotten a real estate developer's ex-wife half his business plus $1.2 million in cash. Another case involved a restaurant chain owner who ended up paying alimony for 20 years. They demanded mediation before trial, confident they held all the advantages. The session was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at Dawson's office. Rachel sat across from me, wearing makeup that emphasized shadows under her eyes like she'd been suffering insomnia. She avoided eye contact, playing the traumatized wife flawlessly. Dawson spread documents across the conference table like dealing cards. "My client has documented a pattern of escalating misuse over the past 18 months, she announced. "We have recordings that clearly show Mr. Sullivan using intimidation tactics and verbal threats to control my client's behavior." "We'd like to review those recordings," Robert said. "In due time. First, let's discuss a fair settlement that acknowledges the trauma my client has endured." Their offer was everything. Half the business, which they valued at $2.1 million based on some consulting report they'd commissioned. The house, both vehicles, even Dad's vintage wristwatch that Rachel had always claimed was worthless, but apparently had been appraised at $4,000. In exchange, I'd get to walk away without a lengthy trial that would air our private business in public court. "That's not a settlement," Robert said. "That's extortion." Dawson smiled. "That's justice for a woman who's been silenced for too long. My client is prepared to testify about years of psychological misuse, financial control, and intimidation. The recordings speak for themselves." The mediation failed. Trial was set for 7 weeks later. During that time, Rachel played her role perfectly. She started therapy for trauma recovery with a psychologist who specialized in domestic misuse cases, got a protective order that forced me to move into a Marriott near the airport, posted carefully worded social media updates about finding her voice and breaking free from toxic relationships. The Nashville Business Chronicle ran a brief item about the divorce filing that mentioned the misuse allegations. Nothing detailed, but enough that people in our industry circles started asking questions. I started receiving those looks at business association meetings, the ones that say people are wondering what really happened behind closed doors. Meanwhile, I spent every evening in that hotel room reviewing our security footage with a legal pad and timer, documenting every conversation she'd recorded, noting what she'd included and what she'd edited out. Robert had hired a digital forensics expert named Dr. Patricia Holmes, who specialized in analyzing video evidence for court cases. Dr. Holmes confirmed what I already knew. The files Rachel had saved were edited versions of longer recordings. She could prove it through metadata analysis and timestamp verification. More importantly, she could demonstrate that the original files still existed on our security system's backup servers. 3 days before trial, Robert called with news that made my blood pressure spike. They filed additional evidence, video footage of you threatening to make her pay if she ever left you. I remembered that argument, and I knew exactly how damaging it was going to appear. We met at Robert's office that evening. He pulled up the video file on his laptop. There I was, standing in our living room, pointing at Rachel and saying, "If you walk out that door, you're going to pay for it. I promise you that." It looked terrible, sounded worse. My face was flushed with anger, voice raised and aggressive. Rachel cowered against the wall, tears streaming down her face, looking genuinely terrified. But I remembered what happened next. After I'd said those words, I'd immediately apologized, explained that I meant she'd regret missing her mother's birthday celebration, not that I'd retaliate. Somehow we'd talked it out, ended up laughing about how we'd both overreacted to family event stress. "Where's the rest?" I asked. Robert paused the video. This is what they submitted, about 80 seconds of footage. The argument lasted 25 minutes, and I apologized right after that. That's when I realized Rachel had made a crucial mistake. She'd been so focused on creating incriminating clips that she'd forgotten something important about our security system. "I have access to the original files," I said. Not just the copies she downloaded and edited, but the raw footage from the security system's main server. Everything gets automatically stored on an external cloud server for insurance compliance purposes. Robert leaned forward. "Complete versions of what? Every conversation she recorded, every argument she edited, the full context she's been eliminating to make me look abusive?" The trial started on a Tuesday morning in September. Judge Victoria Martinez presided. She had a reputation for fairness, but little patience for games or manipulation. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the case, and several local business owners had shown up to observe how it unfolded. Daniel Richardson was there, sitting in the gallery with 3 other logistics company owners who knew my reputation. Tyler Morgan had taken the morning off to testify if needed. Even Dr. Holmes, our digital forensics expert, was ready with her analysis equipment. Patricia Dawson presented Rachel's case first, painting a picture of escalating misuse supported by carefully selected video clips. Each recording was damning out of context. Me yelling about money, me slamming a door during an argument, me telling Rachel she was being unreasonable and self-centered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dawson said during her opening statement, "you're going to see and hear evidence of a pattern of psychological misuse that escalated over months. Mr. Sullivan used his business success and financial control to intimidate and isolate his wife." Rachel took the witness stand wearing a conservative dress and minimal makeup, playing the recovering victim perfectly. She spoke quietly about feeling trapped in a marriage with someone who controlled every aspect of her life. "He installed those cameras everywhere," she testified, her voice barely above a whisper. "Said it was for security, but it felt like surveillance, like he was watching my every move, waiting for me to make a mistake." Dawson played the threatening video again. "Can you tell the court how you felt when your husband said these words to you?" Terrified, Rachel whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I knew he meant it, that he'd find a way to hurt me if I tried to leave." The performance was flawless. Even I almost believed it, watching from the defendant's table. She'd practiced this testimony for months, perfecting every gesture and inflection. Then Robert started his cross-examination. He began, slowly, asking basic questions about the security system, when it was installed, why, who maintained it. He established that I'd paid for it, installed it myself, and maintained full administrative access to all recordings. "Mrs. Sullivan," Robert said, "you testified that you felt these cameras were installed to watch you. But isn't it true that this system was installed after a break-in at your husband's business warehouse?" "I suppose, but... And isn't it true that similar systems are standard in the logistics industry for insurance compliance purposes?" Dawson objected, but Judge Martinez allowed the question. "Mrs. Sullivan, have you ever accessed recordings from this security system yourself?" That's when her composure first cracked. She looked at Dawson with panic in her eyes. "I don't understand the question." Robert pulled out the access logs Dr. Holmes had analyzed. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence showing that Mrs. Sullivan accessed the security system 53 times over an 8-month period, downloading and editing specific recordings. Objection? Dawson stood up. This is irrelevant to the misuse allegations. On the contrary, Robert said, it's directly relevant to the credibility of the evidence she's presented. Judge Martinez reviewed the logs. Objection overruled. Continue, Mr. Chen. That's when Robert played the first complete recording, the threatening exchange about her mother's birthday celebration. But this time, including my immediate apology and our reconciliation afterward, the complete context made it clear I'd been talking about her missing a family event, not threatening retaliation. As you can see, Your Honor, Robert explained, the defendant's words were taken from a longer conversation where he clarified his meaning and apologized for his tone. The plaintiff's version deliberately removes this context. We went through each recording methodically, every edited clip followed by the complete conversation, every accusation of misuse followed by evidence of manipulation and provocation, but the real bombshell came when Robert played the conversation Rachel had with Monica, her own voice, discussing her strategy to provoke him to look unstable and get everything he thinks he deserves. The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Martinez asked to review the recording herself, listening with headphones to ensure she heard every word clearly. The trick is provoking him to anger on camera, Rachel's voice said through the courtroom speakers. Judges respond strongly to that material, especially when it's a successful businessman versus a frightened wife. Dawson tried to object, claiming the recording was inadmissible because it was made without her client's knowledge. But Robert was ready. Your Honor, the plaintiff has spent this entire trial submitting recordings that were made without my client's knowledge. She can't claim that evidence obtained through secret recordings is valid when it supports her case, but invalid when it contradicts her story. Judge Martinez agreed. The recording stood. After Robert finished his presentation, I stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to add something. The courtroom was still processing what they'd heard. Rachel sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, her carefully constructed victim persona crumbling. My wife walked into this courtroom with edited videos, fake tears, and a story designed to destroy my reputation and steal everything I've worked for, I said. She thought I was too stupid to realize what she was doing. I pulled out the folder containing printed screenshots from the security system logs. These documents show every time she accessed our security recordings over the past 8 months, every file she downloaded, every conversation she edited. This wasn't a desperate woman documenting misuse. This was calculated fraud. Judge Martinez reviewed the access logs, comparing them to the dates of the arguments in question. The pattern was undeniable. Furthermore, I continued, the recording of her discussing the strategy with her friend proves this was premeditated fraud. She didn't document misuse. She manufactured it. Dawson tried one last objection, but Judge Martinez had heard enough. Counselor, your client has submitted deliberately falsified evidence to this court. That's perjury and it's contempt of court. I'm dismissing this petition immediately. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. Daniel Richardson started clapping from the gallery, and several other business owners joined in. The aftermath was swift. Judge Martinez referred Rachel's case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. The frozen accounts were released back to me within a week. Rachel faced not only the collapsed divorce case, but also mounting legal bills from both sides. She eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges to avoid prison time, receive probation, community service, and a permanent criminal record. Her dream of law school died with her felony conviction. The business recovered faster than I'd expected. The Amazon contract came through 3 weeks after the trial. Turned out they'd been waiting to see how things resolved before moving forward. Word spread quickly through the logistics community about what had really happened, and we actually picked up 4 new accounts from competitors of Nashville Freight Systems. 8 months later, I bought a new house outside Nashville, closer to the warehouse. Kept the security system, though. Old habits die hard, and the trial had taught me the value of complete documentation. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal or the legal fees or even the months of stress. It was realizing how long she'd been planning it, how carefully she'd studied my reactions and vulnerabilities. But sometimes the people who think they know you best are the ones who underestimate what you're capable of when you have to protect everything you've built. These days, Sullivan Logistics is stronger than ever. 27 trucks now, new contracts across 5 states, and a reputation for reliability that money can't buy. I learned that technology is only as effective as the person using it. And if you're going to manipulate recordings, you better make sure you control all the footage, not just the highlights you think serve your purpose. Trust is earned through actions over time, but preparation and documentation, that's what saves you when trust gets betrayed.